What's up, everybody? Welcome to Gojo with Mike Gojo Jr. That is me. With me, as always, unless he has entered the transfer portal, Brandon Newman. Brandon, what's going on?
Nothing much, Mike. I am fantasizing about the transfer portal. Just the optimism that what is to come if you jump in, and then the crushing defeat if no one bites.
I know it's sort of a tough thing to kind of think about here. You can get humbled pretty quick in all of this. And right now, honestly, I would feel that sort of left out if I wasn't in the transfer portal. Like, it seems like there is going to be portal FOMO building up.
Yeah, I mean, yes, it's all the cool kids are doing it. Like, quite literally.
No, literally, all of them are doing it. We got a great show for you guys today, with and without the portal. Make sure you download, subscribe, rate, and review Gojo, whatever portal you get our podcast from. Leave us a 5-star rating and a review, and check us out on the DraftKings YouTube channel as well. Trevor Sikkema from Pro Football Focus is going to join us today. Does an outstanding job covering the league over there, formerly with the DraftNet, formerly covering the Tampa Bay Buccaneers as well. You may know him on Twitter as Tampa Bay Trey. And so he's going to stop by. We take a look at plenty of what we saw yesterday, including the prognosis for the Dolphins. We didn't talk as much about the other side of that 49ers game yesterday, as well as some other teams down the stretch of this NFL season that we'll be keeping an eye on.
Well, the last time we had Trevor on, he was looking at rings. He hasn't gotten married yet, has he?
He has not gotten married yet, no. He is currently engaged to ESPN's Alyssa Lang, South Carolina alum, and thus for bowl season enemy of our podcast in the meantime, even though we love Alyssa and she's wonderful.
True that. Yeah.
She's wearing the wrong colors for this time around. But yes, not married yet, but very much engaged, and that is very much public, so we didn't break news here. But if you heard it for the first time, make sure you congratulate Trevor and Alyssa, because they're wonderful. We've also got NFL Top 5, Bottom 5 today. We will take a look at one of the more toxic bowl situations, mess on top of mess this bowl season that hits very close to home for Brandon. We will begin some of the holiday controversy, since I saw a list on Twitter that needs our attention, and we will take a look at what the hell's going on in that portal. But Brandon, before we get to that, it's time, Brandon. It's time to be mad online about the Heisman.
Ooh, yes. Let's do it.
So, as a Heisman voter, yesterday was a very big day for me. Yeah.
Yes. Wait a minute. You vote on the Heisman?
Yes.
Mike.
Wait, have we not talked about that?
No, fuck no. We haven't ever talked about the fact that you vote on the Heisman, Mike. What the hell? When did you start voting on the Heisman?
It's my favorite flex. It started like 3 years ago.
3 years ago you started voting for the Heisman?
Yeah.
The Heisman trophy. Like, okay, do you know how many votes are? I don't want to actually. Let's act like there's only 12. I know there's not only 12, but let's like there's only 12.
Yeah, there's a lot of Heisman voters here, but the folks at the Heisman Trust are very kind. I often tell the story. I got asked one year when I was working at ESPN to MC the night before the Heisman ceremony in New York. They have a dinner and event for all of the players, their families, their coaches, whoever's in town supporting them, and each of the guys that's a finalist receives a plaque commending them for just being a finalist for the award. It's a really kind of intimate event. I don't know if they're back to doing it now post-pandemic, but I was there the year that Joe Burrow won the Heisman for that award. It was him, Chase Young, and Justin Fields were up for the award. Jalen Hurts was also there, and that is where my realization that Jalen Hurts was the future president of the United States of the Philadelphia Eagles was born, because walking in there, every other kid, because they're kids, they're 18 to 21-year-old guys, was wearing a team-issued polo. That was what the Ohio State guys are wearing. Joe Burrow was wearing his LSU letter jacket. And Justin Fields walks in here with
Jalen Hurts.
Excuse me. Justin Fields was in the team-issued. Him and Chase Young were in the team-issued polo. Jalen Hurts walks in here with a turtleneck and a blazer over the top. Ooh. That man looked like he could have been running for office, the CEO of some company that was coming to invest, or was, a sponsor of the Heisman, or the person that was eventually going to be one of the nominees for it. That guy, presidential as fuck, was the biggest takeaway from that experience with Jalen Hurts. So
we said it before when he came top of the handsome list, world's most interesting man, world's most interesting quarterback. And my mind exploded, Mike, because I remember, did we not have lunch that day in New York City? The day that you hosted that, like me, you, and Dane?
Yep. So we went to lunch that day, and then later that night I did that, and that's actually where, like, after that, they were like, all right, well, like, we would also, like, you're a member of the media. Would you like to vote on the Heisman? And the rest is history. So,
wow.
Yeah. And so while I know there are a lot of qualms about the award from people, and they looked at it as largely a quarterback popularity award, it is something that I'm very proud of, and I take pretty seriously as my, you know, opportunity to be a voter on this one. So shout out to the Heisman Trust, as always, for making it happen for your boy. Greatly appreciated. That being said, Brandon, I cannot talk about who I voted for until after the trophy's handed out.
Okay.
But I can get mad with the rest of the internet about the things that we saw happen here without getting into specifics, because after that long-winded preamble where I made the Heisman Trophy all about me and in a really impressive fashion.
Honestly, not even enough. I was ready to go another 5 minutes, but I'll move on.
The 4 guys that will be finalists for the Heisman Trophy Award announced on Monday: USC's Caleb Williams, Ohio State's C.J. Stroud, TCU's Max Duggan, and Georgia's Stetson Bennett. Now, that last one was the kicker that surprised a lot of people. Stetson Bennett, who is a national champion, and as Spencer Hall has repeatedly pointed out on the Shutdown Fullcast, the future owner of many great Kia dealerships in the greater Atlanta area.
You ain't lying.
As I have had pointed out to me by many fans of the Georgia football team, there are people that wonder if he's even the third best player on their offense this season, Brandon. That's how loaded this Georgia team is. That's what we know about the machine over there. And so I don't first off, congratulations to all these guys. I mean that sincerely. These are all phenomenal players. And I don't want to turn this into bashing one in particular. That one certainly surprised me. And I think it's more about the omissions on the other side. What?
Why, as a Heisman voter, Mike, why were you surprised by Stetson Bennett getting in? Because for me, it makes sense.
So I would say this: the way I look at the Heisman, and where there's always conversations about these, MVP tangent awards in sports, is what is the criteria for voting on it? And it's kind of like the college football playoff itself. It's some combination of best and most deserving. And the way I always look at it is the most boiled down version possible is how valuable is this person to their team when it comes to their production and what it means in the context of that team, and then what kind of success has it led that team to. It's not to say that it's got to be the best player on the best team award, which it's somewhat become over the years in a lot of people's minds, but it's, hey, in order to be up for this award, your contributions do probably have to lead to some greater thing for your team. And so they tend to be the better teams in college football. And so I look at that and I just go, all right, with this year's Georgia team and last year's Georgia team, there are a lot of other things that I can point to on that team that lead to high-end winning before I would get to Stetson Bennett's name, even if he is someone that's incredibly valuable to that team, that especially in this season with the experience coming off of last year is extremely important. I could make some of the same argument, by the way, as to why C.J. Stroud is another name on this list that I know is a very good player, but when we look at it and go, well, with all the weapons that you've got in that Ohio State offense, this is something where maybe the load isn't strapped quite as firmly to his back. The 2 names that got brought up by most people, Brandon, that were upset about the way that this proceeded, and I think get to sort of the process for how we go about doing this, was Hendon Hooker, the quarterback for the Tennessee Volunteers, who was injured in their game against South Carolina and then missed their last game of the season, and Blake Corum, the running back for Michigan, who was also injured in their game versus Illinois, was not able to come back and really do much of anything against Ohio State, and then had season-ending knee surgery and will be out for the rest of the way, missed their Big Ten championship game against Purdue as well. And looking at that, Brandon, both of those guys who, on paper, again, and really in practice, looking at their performances here, looked like guys that were extremely important parts of 2 of the best teams in the country. Michigan is the number 2 team in college football, and that team is defined by their ground game. And as great as their offensive line is, they won the Joe Moore Award for the best O-line last year. this guy was such a difference maker on the field for them. And there are so many instances when you cut on the tape of this team of where you watched him take good runs and good blocking and turn them into great plays that I think have been the difference for this Michigan team all year long. And then for Hendon Hooker, they were the number one team in the country. They had two of the best wins that we saw all year long in an offense that can only go fast and do what it does when you put more on the plate of the quarterback, even if some of the concepts are a little simpler than what we see in some pro style schemes. The pace of it and what it requires as far as deep ball precision are all reasons why we saw this team take a big jump when they went from Joe Milton to Hendon Hooker last season. And so that's part of my frustration for both of those guys and part of what I've seen from a lot of people on the outside about why those two players in particular who just weren't around on conference championship weekend, one because Hendon Hooker's team wasn't playing, but two because both guys were injured, I think frustrates a lot of people because this is supposed to be an entire season award.
Yeah, Mike, that makes sense. But I struggle to remember a time where someone in New York waiting to hear if they won the Heisman or not was injured at all. Is that fair to say?
It's fair to say to an extent, but also I can understand when someone's injured and misses a bulk of time where they would have been able to go out there and put some of those things on tape. Like, one of my biggest regrets and the what could have beens for this season will be what could have been for Jalen Carter, the star defensive tackle for Georgia, had he not been injured in that play against Missouri, because he ended up missing 2 games, but then really has been used sparingly down the stretch of the season. They brought him back in and would use him on third downs. They were trying to limit the snap count because they know what they need him for, the postseason and the national championship that they eventually want to play in. But if that guy had been fully healthy all season long, we saw on those small samples, and we saw it again in the SEC championship, he's on borderline unblockable and would come in and force fumbles or sack the quarterback or do any number of things that lead me to think that if we had gotten him truly healthy over a long season, we could have talked about a Heisman campaign for an interior D lineman for maybe the first time since Ndamukong Suh in 2009.
Damn.
So that feels like what we missed out on there. But like, I understand the injury is a factor. And when you stack some of those guys up again, and again, you could throw Drake May into this conversation. Also, I know his production tailed off a little bit in the last couple of games against NC State and Clemson, but that was still a guy who had to shoulder a load outside of what most of the rest of these guys had to fathom because of the quality of rest of that team in North Carolina and what they were still able to accomplish getting to the ACC championship.
Okay, I'm glad that you laid out your criteria and how you look at voting because you are a voter. But as someone who just sees the Heisman or just saw the Heisman as a television event at a certain point in time, it was just the best player on the most relevant team a lot of times. It felt like, you know what I mean? Like, I remember on our official visit for banquet weekend, we were on Jimmy Clausen's basement watching Tim Tebow win the Heisman for that night. And it was... Everyone was talking about, how good he was and things like that, but it just seems consistent that it was the most relevant player on the best team. So with that, that's why I think Stetson Bennett, like, it makes sense for him to go in there, just for my novice brain coming into it. But if there's a player, obviously, college football in general, what have you done for me lately? If there's a player who wasn't there for the conference championship, that unfairly, obviously, feels like it is the thing that kept them out.
Yeah, and I think that's part of the frustration because, again, all of these guys are deserving. Like, when you talk about these top-end guys.
Full season award, yeah.
Yeah, for a full season award because a lot of them have really incredible numbers on the top end. When we talked about C.J. Stroud, Max Duggan just came off a performance that we mentioned in the Big 12 championship game. First quarterback to throw for 250 and run for over 100 since Deshaun Watson in 2014 in the ACC title. Uncommon. He has been an engine. We talked to his coach Sonny Dykes on this podcast. Like, I figured Max would be one of the guys that had a very good shot of getting to New York, even if we think this is an award that's largely going to be a no contest between Caleb Williams and everybody else. And so it's not that there aren't plenty of deserving guys in here, but I get a little frustrated when it seems like, and I think a lot of people get a little frustrated when it seems like it's just, what have you done for me in this last game of the season? And everyone's got their process, and I'm sure everyone's got their reason for this. I hope that they can use to defend all that, because that's the other thing. Like, when this is done, I love to open up and say, this is who I voted for and this is why, because I think everyone should have to be able to defend those things publicly when we talk about this.
Yeah, I'm excited to see who wins, especially since it's not a clear-cut winner right now. Obviously, you could say it is with Caleb Williams, but he got injured in his last game, and he may not be playing in their bowl game either, Mike. So I don't know. It's interesting. It feels a little bit more interesting than it has in a long time.
Yeah, well, and I think regardless too, seeing couple different uniforms involved, seeing a USC quarterback back on this stage is extremely nostalgic for me. Having Stetson Bennett be here is sort of the culmination of what's happened in the last couple of years for Georgia, right? Is they've been so unavoidably dominant in the face of college football that their quarterback is now a prestige position, or feels like it, in the sport, even if it's a guy that was the former walk-on and has the story that Stetson Bennett has, which, I mean, you add this onto it, one of the better modern college football stories as far as someone maximizing their talent in the right situation of anyone that I can think of. And now, regardless of where he finishes in the voting, the fact that it's going to be in the top 4 for the Heisman is damn insane.
Yeah, I mean, no one's considering the fact that he's throwing to a 6'7", 250 Darnell Washington at tight end and the likes there. But I think it is the Heisman should be a narrative award as much as it is a full season award. And I think Stetson Bennett, he checks a lot of boxes.
He's a very good player. He's a dual threat player for them, which I know gets brought up because he doesn't look like a dual threat player all the time, but his legs are very deadly. And there is something to be said to being built like Stetson Bennett and being in the middle of all those space aliens and being the one that comes out on top in that heap. Even if it seems like, going back to Jake Fromm versus Justin Fields, that Kirby Smart kind of has a kink at that position. Even if that's kind of a thing, Stetson Bennett still managed to go out here and be the guy that commands it in the middle of that offense of future first-round draft picks, that defense full of future space aliens and all pros. And so it is interesting. I do feel for Blake and for Hendon, just because injury late in the season seemed to cost two guys that were so valuable for so long, but it's not like I'm not happy for the rest of these guys here, and I want to make sure that's abundantly clear. This is an awesome opportunity. It's an awesome experience and celebration of these guys, their seasons. They all carry the rest of their teams with them into this award, and so it's a cool moment for them. We'll wait and see how it shakes out when the final voting comes out, but that is your final for the Heisman Trophy. Brandon, 4 isn't the number that we deal with around here, though. 5 is the number that we deal with. It's week 13 in the NFL's top 5, bottom 5 time. For anyone new around here, it's exactly what it sounds like. We go through and rank the top 5 or bottom 5, anything, players, plays, teams from the weekend that was. We alternate going 5 to 1. Brandon is in the penthouse this week with the top 5. I am in the outhouse with the bottom 5 this week, and I believe we start with the bottom 5 so that we can end this on the right note. Brandon, I'll start this thing off. Number 5 for me. On the bottom 5, Deshaun Watson being bad at actual football this weekend. The Browns won their game against the Texans because their defense scored 21 points. And Deshaun Watson himself threw for 131 yards and an interception and looked like someone that hadn't played football in 2 years and was coming back from an 11-game suspension for sexual assault allegations. This was a person that did not look composed out there, did not look together in an offense that requires a ton of structure and timing in Kevin Stefanski's system. And so we've talked a lot about what led us to this point off the field, but the on-field assessment was also not a passing grade this weekend for Deshaun Watson, even if that would be difficult to expect given how long it's been since he's played meaningful football.
Exactly, Mike. One thing I love about top 5, bottom 5 is after I hear yours, I think about stacking the show, and it's subject to change. So my number 1 is going to be now my number 5.
All right.
And that's Cleveland Browns 27-14 victory over the Houston Texans without Deshaun Watson's help. So the most problematic quarterback in football had a problem sticking to football in his debut. The Cleveland Browns, you already mentioned the things. I want to speak specifically to the fumble recovery for a touchdown from Denzel Ward, the interception return for a touchdown by linebacker Tony Fields, and the punt return touchdown by wide receiver Donovan Peoples-Jones, who I had in fantasy, and I was worried that I wasn't getting them points, but I ended up getting them. This is the Browns are the first team with 2 defensive touchdowns and a special team touchdown in the same game since Green Bay in Week 11 of 2014. So I thought it was his top 5 because I thought it was fitting that in Deshaun Watson's return that he didn't get it right, and the Browns still won because they had been practicing while he had been sitting.
Yeah, no, that's very true. And for the rest of that team, we know that defense has struggled at times to stop the run and do certain things, but them getting after and harassing the quarterback, taking away the football certainly looked like a point of strength this weekend. So congratulations to the rest of the Cleveland Browns in pulling that off. Brandon, number 4 on the bottom 5, speaking of the remnants of the Cleveland Browns, that belongs to Baker Mayfield being released by the Carolina Panthers, the former number 1 overall pick of the Cleveland Browns, who was trying to begin the second act of his career in Carolina, where we have not really seen any quarterback able to have success in that Matt Rule regime that is no more there. Was released on Monday. A lot of people were linking him to the 49ers. He's got to clear waivers first. So they would be able to sign him if he didn't get down to them in waivers. Kyle Shanahan, the head coach of the Niners, said that he'd be surprised if they went that route. He said, we evaluate everyone, and in the wake of Jimmy G's injury, we would be looking in that direction. But Brandon, I think the way that Kyle Shanahan is wired, someone who clearly seems to believe a lot in what his system can provide quarterbacks, I don't think he wants the variables that come with Baker Mayfield on and off the field. And I think this is more about Kyle Shanahan probably going to everyone in that organization and saying, no, I'm good enough to make it work with Brock Purdy. I can make it work with a rookie. I don't need for us to go and do something at least like this. Maybe there's another veteran that pops up out there that they can think of. I was talking to my dad earlier, and he mentioned Nick Foles' name as a possibility in that conversation. But in the meantime, I would see them sticking with Brock Purdy truly before they brought in Baker.
Yeah, Mike, and I think this is perfect time for me to go to my we're at 4, right? Top 4 in the NFL is the 49ers signing veteran Josh Johnson. Do you remember Josh Johnson?
Yeah, hasn't Josh Johnson played for like 80 teams and in the XFL?
So he is making, yes, the answer to your question. He's making my list because he is now he's a player that has been on the most teams in NFL history. In his 13 seasons, he has now been a part of 14 different teams, and this is his 3rd stint with the 49ers, Mike. So they're signing him off the Broncos practice squad because the Lord knows the practice squad, how bad they must be if Russell Wilson is still out there. But shouts out to him. Always rooting for every black quarterback, but I did want to run through where he has been.
Yes.
Tampa Bay Buccaneers, 2008 to 2011.
San Francisco 49ers, 2012. Sacramento Mountain Lions, 2012. Cleveland Browns, 2012. Cincinnati Bengals, 2013. San Francisco 49ers, 2014. Cincinnati Bengals, 2015. New York Jets, 2015. Indianapolis Colts, 2015. Buffalo Bills, 2015. Baltimore Ravens, 2016. New York Jets, 2016. Houston Texans, 2017. Oakland Raiders, 2018. Washington R-Words, 2018. San Diego Fleet, 2019. Detroit Lions, 2019. Los Angeles Wildcats, 2020. San Francisco 49ers, 20 to 2021. New York Jets, 2021. Baltimore Ravens, 2021. Denver Broncos, 2022.
And now back with the 49ers. Mike, I love a journeyman, and I love an opportunity. And Jimmy G provided one.
He's not a journeyman. He's a journey man.
Ooh.
Let him handle his business. Damn.
I got to fast forward. I'm going to fast forward me reading through that in the edit. That's going to be fun.
There you go. I love that journey for you there, Brandon. Yes. I love that journey for Josh Johnson, who I'm sure Kyle Shanahan believes he could also make look like a very good quarterback in this league. Brandon, number 3 for me, the Los Angeles Rams. And I didn't want to put them much lower than this because in that game against the Seahawks, that team battled their asses off despite not having their top receiver, their starting quarterback. They've started both John Wolford and Bryce Perkins at different points in this season. season. They've had one of the most injured offensive lines I can remember in pro football, and Aaron Donald has been out with an ankle injury as of late. It was essentially Bobby Wagner, Jalen Ramsey, and the Pips going to work trying to make it happen, and they almost made it happen in a Bobby Wagner revenge game. But now starting 3-9, they officially have the worst record and worst start for a reigning champion in NFL history, and it seems like by all accounts they're going to shut down most of the core pieces for the rest of the season because there's nothing left to play for at this point.
Yeah, I feel like Aaron Donald had a hint of this. That's why he's talking about retiring. Obviously not this much of a remission going into the season, but it's too bad for them. It's too bad for them. But this is a good segue into my number 3, Mike, because this is another team that, or I'll say another player that did something great in a losing effort. Justin Fields is the best rushing quarterback in NFL history. I'm just going to say it flat out because he's done all these crazy things within the first few games. Is that
in NFL history?
In NFL history, he is now and will be, Mike. Justin Fields recorded a 55-yard touchdown run. Some people are saying 56 in the first quarter off of a freaking read option play. It wasn't technically right up the middle, but for a quarterback scramble, it definitely was. I guess it wasn't a scramble, it was a design play. But Fields is the first quarterback in the Super Bowl era to rush for a touchdown in the 6 consecutive games. And he also has 3 touchdowns, Mike, 3 rushing touchdowns of at least 50 yards or more this season. Not rushing like gains, touchdowns. Like that's a record for the NFL, and that's why I'm saying that he is the best. Like they already said that they're using Lamar Jackson plays to get him in position, and he seems to be doing it even better because he might be one of those Jamar Chase guys that's a lot bigger in person, but Justin Fields is legitimately electric, and the Bears have an answer at quarterback finally.
They do. He is one of the most exciting runners I have ever seen in modern football. I don't know if I'm going to make him the best in NFL history just yet, but he is faster than I remember him being in college because we didn't have to see him do that this much. And so, man, those are some eye-popping stats. Dear God. Number 2, Brandon, completely far away from fun offense, where one of those quarterbacks you mentioned lives. The entire Broncos and Ravens game. The fact that Lamar Jackson is now day-to-day with a knee injury, and we're not sure what that's going to mean for his future this season. The fact that the Broncos still cannot do anything in the red zone. They just decided they were so bad in the red zone, they weren't going to go there at all. 0 trips to the red zone in this game against the Ravens in something that was just an affront to God for any of us to have to watch for extended time. I said to someone yesterday, this must be what it was like looking directly into the reactor at Chernobyl.
Oh, Mike. Oh, what a great TV show. But I would say I would say this. Everyone tried to compare Russell Wilson to Peyton Manning, or the Broncos were doing the Peyton Manning thing all over again, right? This stat was egregious. Peyton Manning in 2013 had 7 touchdowns in the very first game of the season. Okay. Russell Wilson in 2022 has 7 touchdowns with 13 weeks into the season.
I know. I remember you brought this up earlier that we're still at fewer touchdowns than bedrooms or bathrooms in his house.
Than bathrooms, yes. We haven't got to that 12th touchdown yet, Mike. It's sad, but at least the Ravens beat them for me.
Truly. What do you got at number 2, Brandon?
That Sunday night Colts Cowboys scoregami, Mike.
Ooh, scoregami,
Mike. The Cowboys' 54-19 win over the Indianapolis Colts was the 1,074th different final score in NFL history, marking just the second time this season that we've had scoregami. And also the 33-point explosion that we talked about in the fourth quarter for the Cowboys. The most points differential, largest, whatever. The biggest fourth quarter that anyone has had in NFL history. Second most points scored in a quarter in NFL history. We were seeing something wild and crazy, Mike. I knew it felt different, but scoregami. Who would have thunk it?
Love a good bit of scoregami here. Again, final scores that we have gotten for the first time. Nothing better. Good nerd shit, Brandon. You led me right to number 1, the Colts' fourth quarter. All the reasons you just mentioned. It was terrible. Ooh. It was hard to watch. That was a 21-19 game, and then the lights absolutely went out. No Colts offensive player could hold on to the football. Cats and dogs were living together. It was tough. It was tough to watch, and I felt for everyone involved.
Well, let's go to the other side of that. Number one, Man Campbell, baby. The Detroit Lions score on all 8 offensive possessions in their 40-14 win over the Jacksonville Jaguars. Suck it, Emerson. Suck it, Trevor Lawrence. Like, this was crazy. Obviously, Andrew Siciliano, the other red zone guy over there in LA in your town, tweeted this, Mike, and I had to reiterate it. Other than taking a knee when they won the game, the Lions scored on all 8 possessions. No NFL team has scored on every possession in a regular season game in 4 years. The Detroit Lions are actually turning they're turning the corner, Mike. I think this is an actually good football team. They're as the Monday Night Football, they said still not in the hunt. They said sniffing around, and the Lions are still sniffing around in the NFC.
The Lions are still sniffing around in the NFC. That is top 5, bottom 5, and that is actually a perfect segue into one of the many things that we're going to talk about with Pro Football Focus's Trevor Sikkema when he joins us in just a second as we look at some of the top performers this weekend and a little bit of not only the Lions present, but what this might mean for the Lions in the future. Next. All right, very excited to welcome in one of our friends, have him back around here. Trevor Sikkema, you guys know him over at Pro Football Focus, host of It's Just Football and the NFL Stock Exchange pod here on the daily content grind, my man. And I hope this is one of those days that I plug the YouTube pretty relentlessly because we're recording this on Monday before the Tampa Bay Monday night game, and my man is creamsicle ready for war. Ooh! Ooh!
Got the starter jacket on, baby. It's prime time. I gotta enjoy Tom Brady playing for my childhood football team before he leaves again, but probably for real this time. So, we're trying to soak it in, trying to get the good vibes going. And yeah, anytime it's a primetime game, it's good stuff. So I had to make sure that I don the starter jacket today.
Have you prepared yourself for Tom just going right back to his old love and going back to New England and completing the prophecy?
Not until this very moment. So you've really just absolutely blown up my perception of what is possible in the world. I was over here thinking, all right, he's going to retire. Maybe he'll just go to the booth eventually. That'll be fine. I could deal with that. And then I had to come to grips with, oh no, what if he goes to San Francisco? Like, what if he forces his way out, still wants to play football, goes home to the San Francisco team? Now I'm out here thinking he might have a reunion. And I'm going to have to read all the tweets of, oh, I love New England. Now I'm back. This is where I belong. I don't want that, Mike. Why would you do that to me? Why would you do that?
I thought that would honestly be the lesser of the two evils. Because if he goes back to New England, there's still a bunch of other places that roster has to get better. If he goes out to San Francisco, that team could win a Super Bowl like that. Like we're looking at that team and San Francisco with Brock Purdy at the helm right now, still kind of going, well, maybe. Like watching that this weekend, did it not still look like a team that's capable of at least making it very hairy for everyone in the NFC?
I was going to say, with all due respect to Brock Purdy, Tom Brady could probably win a Super Bowl for them. But, dude, the 49ers are now very interesting. I mean, that was a fantastic game that we saw there. We knew that it was going to be one of the better ones. I mean, that 4 o'clock slate was awesome between that game and then the Bills-Chiefs game. But it is wild how quarterback-friendly Kyle Shanahan's offense is, man. And I get it. Like, they've done so much work to make it as friendly as possible. The offensive line is good. Now they're healthy. You totally see that. Getting to throw to guys like Deebo Samuel and Christian McCaffrey out of the backfield. Brandon Ayuk's becoming one of the best route runners in the NFL. George Kittle's one of the best all-around tight ends that there is in the league. And so, you just throw all those weapons out there, and I don't want to say me or you could play quarterback because that's probably not true. You're probably a lot closer to it than I am. But we see a Mr. Irrelevant step into the game, goes into the year's QB3. He goes out and beats the Dolphins, a playoff team. Dolphins could get the 1 seed in the AFC, and he goes out and he beats them. And he shows some moxie, he shows some guts, and it's just like that offense it just instills so much confidence in no matter who is playing it. And I think that is the gem of what Kyle Shanahan does, is no matter what position you're playing, you're probably playing about as confident as you ever have when you're within that system. And it just works, man. If you can hit across the middle, which Brock Purdy seemed to be fearlessly doing this past weekend, you got a chance to beat anybody, especially when that defense is behind you. So I would have told you after this week, if Jimmy G was still healthy, that I would have told you the Niners are the scariest team right now in the NFC. All respect to Philadelphia, because I do not want to sound disrespectful to them at all. But the way that Niners defense is rolling, It felt like if Jimmy G was still at the helm, they would have felt like one of the scariest teams. Still a good team, all due respect to Brock Purdy. But I'd probably still put the Eagles in number 1 now, given the circumstances.
Yeah, I'd agree. They went from, I think, a weapon of mass destruction to more of a landmine that you might step on at this point. Still going to be a tough out on any occasion. And if you see them in the postseason, we clearly saw that defense go up against, like you said, a Miami team that is offensively based, that is cut from a similar cloth, but, more of the vertical version of what they've been doing in San Francisco. Really stymied by the speed at linebacker, the playmaking in the secondary, obviously Nick Bosa up front, and what they're able to kind of scheme to make sure that he continues to get matchups where he can eat. All of those things to corral any of the best offenses in the NFL. Until you get to third down, it's a pretty simple formula with them. Our guys are better than your guys. We're going to turn them loose up front. Right. We're going to let Fred Warner and this linebacker crew run all over the place and close windows quickly, and it made their lives a living hell. And so from that standpoint, you're going to always, complimentary football-wise, give your offense a pretty decent shot. I also think this is kind of a scouting win for them, too, with Brock Purdy. I said yesterday, a lot of the things that you're asked to do as the quarterback in this offense, pre-snap motion, shifting guys around, all the playing with the chess pieces that you have here, was stuff that Brock had to do in the Iowa State offense that they ran under his time with Matt Campbell. And so from that standpoint, you've got round peg and round hole at the very least, even if the talent's not quite there for the peg.
Yeah, no, I agree. And, I watched Brock Purdy like everybody else did when he came on. It was either a freshman or a redshirt freshman. I can't remember. When he first kind of came onto the scene for the Cyclones, and it's like, oh, maybe they have something here. And then the years went by, and it's like, all right, he doesn't really have an NFL arm. He just doesn't have the greatest arm. And that's really tough, right? You can get about as good in your system as you can, but when it comes to jumping up to the next level, you got to have arm talent. And that's ultimately why Brock Purdy fell as far as he did, all the way to Mr. Irrelevant in the draft class, is because he just doesn't have the arm talent. Now, like you said, it's decently easy because he's able to step in right away, and a lot of it is just in rhythm timing stuff, and he clearly has confidence to be able to do that. Is the ball getting there on a frozen rope? No, but it's getting there, and so he's giving his guys a chance. When it comes to, hey, you got to start your QB3 now, it's hard to think anybody's QB3 out there would have played better than Brock Purdy played for the Niners last night.
So they've displayed depth there. We talked about that part of the offense here. I do want to look at, because we didn't talk about this as much yesterday, the Miami Dolphins portion of things in here. This is a loss that stung. Tua Tagovailoa off on more throws than we're used to seeing. Jalen Waddle severely limited in this game. His touches there. How much did this affect your perception of the Dolphins?
I still think the Dolphins are a team that any given week, they can beat any team in the NFL. I think they have that formula, especially when they're fully healthy. And they weren't fully healthy yesterday. Teron Armstead's beat up. They were missing Jalen Waddle a little bit from injury. And so those things definitely play into it. So I want to make sure that that context is set. But when it comes to being a legit Super Bowl contender, I think this past week's game was really the game that revealed it for me that I just don't believe in Tua to be that kind of a player, because in order to get to a Super Bowl and win a Super Bowl, you've got to win at least 3 games in a row against increasingly tougher opponents as you get towards the final goal. I don't know if Tua has that kind of consistency against some of the better pass rushers, the better secondaries, better overall defenses that he's going to go up against. His numbers right now, especially in our PFF systems, when it comes to playing under pressure, they are good. And so I want to make sure that I give him that credit. But watching yesterday, it was a little bit more evidence towards, I feel like that's offensive and skill player based rather than Tua based, because you saw Tua get hit and take some pressure early on in this game. And then you just saw him physically be skittish, I think, the rest of the game. And that kind of shaken confidence, that shook mentality that a lot of people were tweeting about when they were seeing the game, that is the real part to me. And it's an offense that is so well orchestrated, still has so much speed, so much talent, that they can still make those things work. And that's why I say, shoot, even if the Dolphins, match up against one of the best teams in the AFC because of the playoff matchup, if it ends up being like this, they can take a good team down in round 1 of the playoffs. They can take a good team down in round 2 of the playoffs. But can they win 3 in a row, 4 in a row to actually be a legit Super Bowl contender against better defenses as they kind of continue to go along? I lost confidence in that this past weekend. So that's kind of where I am with the Dolphins. Still a damn good football team. Still obviously going in the right direction. Tough to beat week in and week out. But for me to bet on them winning multiple games in a row in the postseason, that took a hit for me this week.
Yeah, it's certainly a good point. I think it's kind of the thing we've feared with them all along is now that you're starting to see some of that attrition, because we're also getting to the point where watching the attrition in the foundation around guys or teams getting healthy at the right time is severely starting to impact quarterback play. And for them to be down 3 offensive linemen in that game and kind of juxtapose that with the trajectory for a team like the Bengals right now, who, boy, oh boy, is the land clearing out in front of them with this Lamar Jackson injury and how poorly the Ravens have played, to really just power through to the driver's seat in the AFC North this year. That's a team where the offensive line has been healthy and getting ready in front of Joe. They reimagined and hockey line changed it this offseason. I said very similar to what the Chiefs did after the Super Bowl against Tampa Bay, where you realized there was a problem in a Super Bowl loss. It got exposed in a glaring stage throughout the postseason, and then you went out there and put the resources into it, and now they've been able to work together long enough, even while some of the skill talent around's been banged up, Jamar Chase, Joe Mixon, and the like, and it's allowed Joe Burrow to do something that I think is incredibly impressive, which is go out and play confident in the pocket despite the fact that he's got no earthly reason as far as his NFL development to have confidence in that area. All he's known is getting hit so far in his career.
Right.
And so now that he's got extra time, the fact that he is still operating in there without any of the like ghosts of Christmas past in that area is really impressive, even if part of that is also I think that group around him is playing a ton better.
Yeah, the Bengals are an absolute house right now. I mean, just to echo a lot of the things that you said, Burrow is playing extremely confident, but that's nothing new going back to LSU. I do think the offensive line's playing better, but Burrow is also getting the ball out a little bit quicker, which is normally not his MO. Remember, like he talked about this offseason. I can't remember what podcast he went on, but he was like, yeah, sacks are just like a thing. You got to take them, especially in the offense that I like to operate in. I like to go for those bigger plays. I like to wait with the ball a little bit. I trust my playmakers. I trust my arm, all that kinds of stuff. And against the Chiefs, it felt like he was very decisive quickly. And not that he's been indecisive before, but it felt like it was just more built into the game plan that he was going to get the ball out quicker. And that's just not something I feel like the Bengals have done a ton of over the last couple of years. So I think that offense is evolving. Zach Taylor is evolving with what he believes is the best way to deploy all of the talent that he has there. T. Higgins proved while Jamar Chase was gone that he is a wide receiver 1 who just happens to be playing wide receiver 2 because they have a top 5 wide receiver in front of him, which is just an unbelievable embarrassment of riches. Lou Anarumo, their defensive coordinator, is, dude, I mean, if he's not talked about as a head coaching candidate, that's just because he's probably told people, nah, I like being a defensive coordinator. Because what he has done over the last 2 years, who beats the Chiefs 3 times in a row? I'll tell you, literally nobody. Literally nobody. Okay? And they're out here doing this 3 times in a row in big games. In big games. The regular season game against the Chiefs last year was a big game. The playoffs, obviously a big game. This huge game. The AFC race is unbelievable. And I wanted to make sure that I point this out too, because it is important. Bengals are now sitting here at 8-4. Okay. For as much as we've talked about, Buffalo getting the 1 seed, the Chiefs getting the 1 seed, the Dolphins getting the 1 seed, maybe the Ravens getting the 1 seed. The Bengals are now 1 game back of the 1 seed in the AFC. They already own the tiebreaker over the Chiefs because of what we saw this week. And they own the tiebreaker over the Dolphins because they beat them earlier in the season. They lost to the Ravens, but they only lost by 2 points in Baltimore. They play the Ravens last game of the year at home, so they have a chance to get the tiebreaker over the Ravens. And the week before that, they play the Buffalo Bills at home and could have the tiebreaker over the Bills. There is no team in the NFL that controls their own destiny more than the Cincinnati Bengals. If you go back to last year, including the playoffs, the last 8 games they've played at home, they have won 7 of them, and the only one they lost was that weird, didn't make sense, throw it out the window week 1 game against the Steelers in which Joe Burrow hadn't played football in like 6 months because remember, he didn't play in the preseason. So if you throw all that out, all of a sudden, Cincinnati looks like it's one of the best home field advantages in the NFL, and they have a chance to get the 1 seed and guarantee that throughout the playoffs. I was not a big believer in a repeat performance of the Super Bowl run that we saw from the Bengals last year. I am now. I have to be now. And they're in a really great spot.
Well, it is a good point because last year, because of how poorly they were built up front, and when we saw them invest the resources, it felt like that was going to be the worst version of the Bengals we saw for a while, even if the record wasn't indicative, right? Because the AFC was so much better than the NFC this season for all those reasons. I will say, you just laid it out. It's a pretty compelling case, not only for their Super Bowl candidacy here and controlling their own destiny. Cincinnati also right now feels like it has claim to the true title of Queen City. Like Charlotte, I'm sorry, but the Panthers have not held up their end of the bargain here. Cincinnati feels like the real Queen City this season.
Do you know Denver's also the Queen City?
What?
We can't just keep. There can't be more than one. There can't be more than one. And there's already three off the top of my head. Charlotte, Cincinnati, Denver. How many more do we have? I was unaware that Denver had also. I thought Denver was just a creepy airport and a lot of marijuana. And now they're apparently the Queen City. Blown away. They're trying to take the Queen City. And I don't know if it. Like I don't know who's the original Queen. I don't know. Like we need to. You and I need to figure out how we need to settle this. Can we become the committee? Can you and I become like the committee of like city nicknames where we come up with different challenges that they have to do to where it's like, all right, well, now you can't call yourself that anymore because you won this challenge. We need to do this.
We're convening the first official meeting of the Queen City Committee, and we're making sure that it just flows. It's effortless. It's perfect. The Queen City Committee. There it is. It feels good. I would say from the Rangoonies to the Queen City Committee here. What a glow up for everyone involved here. Fans of Crap Rangoon meeting on God's internet. I will say to that end also, because I think part of our role as the Queen City Committee is to understand that your performance relative to the other Queen Cities is going to go a long way on the athletic field of determining who gets to actually wear the crown, the literal crown in this case. Now that I know Denver's involved in that, we can also X them out of this conversation. That game against Baltimore was an atrocity. Watching that football game for anyone that exposed them to that over time had to be like looking directly down into the reactor at Chernobyl.
I mean, that's a good way to put it. It's a good way to put the entire season for the Denver Broncos, man. I looked at the Broncos and I was doing my preseason overall season previews, and there were times when I was like, I'm gonna have Denver in the playoffs. Like I'm gonna do it. Like I believe like Russ is gonna bounce back. He's in a new spot. I love the supporting cast he has there. I love the defense. Like I love like all these things are there. And it's gone catastrophically wrong with Russell Westbrook and Nathaniel Hackett. I am almost never an advocate of firing a head coach after 1 year. Now, of course, that is with the understood that I would like for you to have done the work during the hiring process to make sure that you didn't hire a total dud, a la Urban Meyer. I'm not saying that Nathaniel Hackett is Urban Meyer, but when you look at how bad this is, because we had this stat on the show the other day, and it was like the Denver Broncos are averaging 14 points per game, which is the lowest number since the Browns in 2000, I think. They obviously didn't hit 14 this past weekend, so that number is even further down. It's probably into the 13s. They are making history this side of the century in the wrong way. And you can't get rid of Russ. All right. I have an NFL draft podcast called the NFL Stock Exchange podcast, and we do a What Matters Most from every game every Monday. My What Matters Most was the Broncos, who do still have a first-round pick, although it's not their own, which is number 3 overall, which is rough. They do, for the Bradley Chubb trade, still have a first-round pick. It's Miami's, so it's sitting there at 25. My point was going to be, you got to draft the quarterback. You got to think about it because it is such an issue of what's going on right now. You got to draft the quarterback. And then my co-host was like, Connor Rogers, he said, wait, isn't Russ's contract like unmovable? I looked it up. It is asinine. He is $107 million dead cap next year. He is $85 million dead cap the year after. He is $50 million dead cap the year after that. You can't even think about moving on from this dude for the next 3 years. So at that point, you basically have to fire Nathaniel Hackett, which I think is crazy that we're talking about this as a 1-year head coach, but things are bad in Denver, man. And especially if they lose Everode, their defensive coordinator, who is fantastic. Man, things might get bad in Denver real quickly. So they're not going to win that Queen City crown anytime soon.
Nope. That crown is staying firmly east of the Rockies at this point. It is a great point about that deal, because I feel like people were having some version of that conversation when things were really bad with the Packers, and we all looked at that deal and we're like, well, they're going to work it out. And Aaron Rodgers actually hasn't been playing terrible. Like, it's felt bad out there, but there's still been good work inside that process, even though so many parts of the machine were broken. This has been all bad, and one of the cardinal sins of any sport in any level is making the same mistake, forget twice, over and over again. And the Broncos have absolutely been a catastrophe in and approaching the red zone. They didn't even have a red zone trip to speak of in this last game. They just decided that instead of being bad there, they would avoid it altogether and not even get there. And so to have that be a consistent theme that we saw, I can say, galaxy brain shit. Yeah. What if we just don't go? But to have that be the theme going all the way back to week bleeping 1 when we were looking at the Russell Wilson homecoming against Seattle is just sort of proof that no part of this has worked. And at some point you're in for so much of that Walmart money, you might as well go ahead and hit the panic switch a little bit and try and make this work. Because it's wild to see, like, watching the way that Russell Wilson looks playing football, completely devoid of confidence this season, is like watching your dad get beat up in public. You don't really recover from that loss of respect you have in that moment.
No, that's it's tough. I just looked it up. 37.5% conversion rate, touchdown conversion rate when they're in the red zone. That's bad. That's really bad. Number 1 team is it still the Chiefs? I think it's still the Chiefs. Maybe it's still the Chiefs. It's Detroit. What?
Man.
Detroit 73.9%. Get you some, Dan Campbell. Okay. All right.
The Lions buzzsaw. Jared Goff in the year of our Lord 2022, just coming out here making it weird again.
Dude, look, all I'm saying is that if the Lions don't have a chance to draft Bryce Young, which it doesn't feel like they're going to, because it looks like Bryce Young's probably going to go number 1 overall to the Houston Texans, and the Houston Texans aren't giving up that number 1 overall pick. If the Detroit Lions can't get Bryce Young, I'm starting to get into the no quarterback strategy. They got 2 first-round picks. They got 2 second-round picks. Okay, Jared Goff's under contract, and he gets cuttable from here on out, okay? You could live with Jared Goff. You could spend all 4 of those probably top 50, at least top 60 picks on 4 really great players to continue to build out a roster that still needs a lot of talent, and the next year, you can get aggressive after a quarterback if you need to. In fact, I wouldn't hate them taking that second first-round pick that they have, which is a little bit further down the order. It's currently number 15. Trade a little bit further back, get into the 20s, do the Howie Roseman thing where you have 2 first-round picks the next year too. So you're going a little bit further down the order this year just to make sure you gain leverage and have control over the first round the next year. All I'm saying.
No, and you know what? I appreciate the strategy, because clearly the defense is the overwhelming problem right now.
Yes.
Nothing on the offense is glaring as far as things that need to be addressed. The offensive line, especially when they're fully healthy, is a really quality unit. You've got 2 really talented backs. Jamal Williams been a revelation this season. You're still now just getting Jamison Williams, your first-round pick out of Alabama, back on the field since he started the year on the shelf. And so all those things are working in your favor. My only wonder with that is because there's some point where we see certain key areas in the game where you see Jared Goff's limitations pop up every once in a while. Some of the stuff he was a part of a Super Bowl team in Los Angeles. That was real. None of that stuff just goes away. My wonder is, just because so much of this is about the close games that they end up losing, if Dan Campbell is still the coach, if you're taking that long-term strategy by the time you get to drafting in 2024, because there was already, I think, some frustration before the 3-game winning streak this year about, is he going to be the right guy? Can your young program, as you're laying this foundation, absorb so many of these close losses and end up yielding you positive results on the back end?
And there's no doubt that absolutely goes into it. And I thought about that. I was having those conversations just like you said, everybody else was a couple of weeks ago. It's like, man, is Dan Campbell going to get screwed? And is he really not going to be afforded to draft that quarterback that he was probably promised when they brought him in as this rebuild, just because teams get really impatient? I don't think that's the case. Certainly right now, I would certainly say that that's not going to be the case moving forward. I think he gets one more offseason at least. it feels as though with him being a guy who's 2 years in going into year 3, they're probably going to have to get a young quarterback in there just to make sure they have something to lean on for this regime. But in a world where he wouldn't have to worry about that, I would not hate that strategy, because as much as I don't want to do like grass is greener, next year's quarterback class also does look pretty good, especially at the top. So if you continue to have leverage and you got 2 first-round picks and you can move up for one, then all of a sudden maybe that ends up being the right strategy for you. But it's tough when you ask regimes to continue to put off quarterbacks when they need to.
So you're saying that drafting Anthony Richardson with a late first-round pick this year would not be advisable?
Look, go Gators, baby! I'm a Florida Gator grad. I'm wherever we can get our guy AR high in the draft. That's what I want. No, I mean AR is fascinating, right? So he officially declared for the draft this week. We were wondering if that was going to be the case because he is a really polarizing prospect. But man, as we're sitting here, beginning of December, I think somebody's going to take a chance on this dude in the first round. I really do. The highs and just the physical potential of him are nuts. I've watched him on tape a bunch just from watching a lot of Florida Gator games, and then I've also had the chance to watch him in person. He's just an unreal athlete. He is a different caliber of an athlete, both with his legs and with his arm. You saw a lot of his legs when he was the backup for Emory Jones last season with Dan Mullen, and you saw a lot more with his arm than you did the year before. Now, is he a work in progress? Of course he is. There are times when he just misses easy throws, and you go, Anthony, come on, man. Like, you've got to be able to hit those things to even be a starter at the NFL level. But if you understand where he is, I do think that he made a good amount of progress from last year to this year, especially because from what I have heard, there wasn't a lot of investing into an offense that was very Anthony Richardson friendly last year. It felt like they were just orchestrating the offense for Emory Jones, and an Emory Jones offense very different than what would be an Anthony Richardson one. So I don't think there was a lot of progress for AR last year, whereas this year he's really learning a lot of these things for the first time. I think his footwork is definitely improved when he remembers how to point his shoulders in the right direction, keep his feet from under him, continue to stay in a pocket, go through progressions, all of those things. He's shown he has the ability to do that. It's just not muscle memory for him yet, right? He's just not anticipating, he's reacting to things, and you want to get more towards that anticipatory side of things. So he is definitely a ways away, but I like the prospect of Anthony Richardson. I'll say more than I liked any quarterback over last year's class. So that's kind of where I am from. So I would take this dude in the top 50, and I think when it's all said and done, I think the NFL is going to take this dude at the back end of the first round.
Yep, I think we are, especially once we hit workout season and get out of the last entrails of bowl season and the on-field stuff, we're going to see that become more and more the case. Someone is going to look and say, oh no, I got exactly what you need. I see where you're going, and I can be the one to get you there. Trevor can be the one to get you there, guys, on a daily basis. Check out It's Just Football. Check out the NFL Stock Exchange podcast for more great stuff like this over with the fine folks at PFF. Trev, you're the man, looking sharp as always. We'll definitely talk to you again soon, brother.
Appreciate it, man. Anytime.
All right, Brandon. Time to bring this thing home. You know what time it is?
I do, Mike. I do. And this one is inspired by where I imagine you may be during the holidays, where I'm headed during the holidays. I probably won't get this, but I'll be missing it. Some say I'm dreaming of it.
Man, Jordan Mailata, eat your heart out. Brandon Newman coming through and said, yeah, I'm both. Now I have stuck in my head the Eagles offensive line doing their Christmas album, and when they released one of the trailers from the video they put together for it, that part you came in on was Jordan Mailata coming in, hi. It was dude, Jordan Mailata can sang with a A. Yeah, the 6'8", like 340-pound monstrosity that also has the voice of an angel somehow. Well, if you thought that Brandon also had the voice of an angel, make sure you download, subscribe, rate, and review Gojo wherever you get your podcast. And leave us a 5-star rating and a review. Tell him what a great job he did. At Gojo Show on Twitter as well. Brandon, speaking of catering things to your geographic location, let's get to this. The new head coach of the Cincinnati Bearcats has been announced. Luke Fickell headed over to Wisconsin as the Bearcats get ready to join the Big 12. They will be manned by none other than Scott Satterfield, the now former head coach of the Louisville Cardinals. Scott Satterfield was 25-24 at Louisville after 47-16 run at 5 years at App State back on the mountain. And Brandon, this has been very tenuous as of late. Last offseason, there was a lot of heavy petting between Scott Satterfield and some other jobs that were out there. It didn't seem like the reunion with Louisville was going to happen. It didn't seem like everyone was all hunky-dory even for a lot of this year. And now this has ended in divorce in a year where these two teams are getting ready to play in the Fenway Bowl against each other this year. And Brandon, the only thing I'm disappointed in is that Scott Satterfield didn't embrace the mess and coach this game. He says he's not going to coach for either team. He's going to be out focusing on recruiting. He's not going to insert himself in this situation. When Brandon, I very much wanted to see him try and coach both teams in this game, but maybe that was a pipe dream. I don't know, man. I don't know who wouldn't want the Keg and Nails trophy that comes out of this game. Either this is a matchup of a historic rivalry with a great trophy. Well, Brandon, my question for you is, how do you think that this might work with Jeff Brom this time around? Because I want to read you a statement from Jeff Brom, who said, quote, "This has been a very difficult and emotional decision for me and my family. We're extremely happy at Purdue and thankful for the opportunity to lead this program. After intense and thorough discussion, I believe it's important to finish building the process we have begun and honor the commitment I made to our football program, players, and recruits. While going home was a very appealing and meaningful idea to me, the timing is not ideal. I believe remaining at Purdue is the right thing to do, and I am excited for the challenges ahead." Brandon, that was former Louisville great Jeff Brom, former Louisville quarterback. In 2018, when he turned down the job at that juncture too, do you think it's going to be any different this time around? Yep. How about that? Well, one thing is he mentioned the word timing in that 2018 statement. It's always got to be about timing going back home because you only get one shot at the alma mater. And I'm sure Jeff Brom knows that as well as anybody. And so we'll wait and see what happens on that front. But there you go. Plenty of drama in the coaching side of the college football postseason. But Brandon, let's get to that and the drama on the player side, because the transfer portal is now open. So the transfer portal used to be this year-round phenomenon. It is now a 2-window process. The transfer portal is open first for 45 days starting December 5th, so that was Monday, until January 18th. It is then open again from May 1st to May 15th. There are exceptions for grad transfers and for players that are going through coaching changes. But for everyone else, you got this time period. And Brandon, it is easier to point out that you had guys like Jordan Travis stay at Florida State, Michael Penix Jr. stay at Washington instead of opting to leave or go to the NFL than it is to nail down exactly who is and who isn't staying with their alma mater. Some of the highlights are a lot of the ACC guys. Clemson's DJ Uiagalelei officially in the portal. NC State's Devin Leary also joining as well. So plenty of big-time names that are going to be jockeying for position near the top of the sport. But Brandon, this is just the numbers from the last 4 years with the transfer portal of the amount of players that jumped into the portal and the amount that actually managed to transfer. And just look at the trend that we've seen. In 2018-19 offseason, 1,729 players entered, 878 actually transferred. The next year, 1,625 entered, 901 transferred. 2020, 2,654 players entered with 1,452 transferring. And in 2021-2022's offseason, 3,085 players jumped in the portal with only 866 actually transferring. And yeah, 28% of the players that jumped in actually ended up leaving their program. And so, Brandon, you're starting to get to the point now. This is going to be year 5 of this, where people are getting more information back on what happens if you leap before you look. And so that's always the thing here, man. Everyone go out and chase the opportunity that's there for you. If you're not in a good situation, make sure you go ahead and get yourself out of that. But also be careful that you don't leave something for an opportunity that isn't there. Use good people in your life to make sure you're getting good information, and try and make the best possible decision that you can, because you only got 5 years of this. Yep, that's for every individual to decide. Every single one. So, worthwhile advice. It's going to be the subject of a lot of writing and discussion over the next month. I'm sure we'll get into it plenty as plenty of schools start jockeying for position of service of experienced players. This is going to become as important or more than high school recruiting in a lot of places, because for new coaches, it allows you to jumpstart it quick. See Lincoln Riley at USC. See what Deion Sanders is going to try and do at Colorado. But also, it allows you to address needs with players that have actually played college football, not ones who you're trying to project from high school. God. All right. Somehow this has turned into a Kevin Durant's diss track here. I, for one, am stunned on that. So, Brandon, let's get to an even more controversial topic and finish it off on the third. I saw this tweeted yesterday by Justin Kirkland, writer and host of John Dutton Must Die. He tweeted, "What are your most unimpeachable personal top 5 Christmas and holiday movies that you must watch? Movies, shows, what have you?" Brandon, you and I have put together a top 5. Would you like me to go first, or do you want to go first? All right, Brandon, number 5 on this list, Love Actually, a movie that I hadn't seen until 2 years ago for the first time, and is a delight. Professor Snape, and that little kid. There's a bunch of famous people in that movie. Yes, yes. I would say I somewhat obvious. Hugh Grant's in that movie. Colin Firth, Emma Thompson, Liam Neeson, Keira Knightley, Alan Rickman. So yeah, Tons of studs in there. Andrew Lincoln as well. Martin Freeman. So big time star-studded ensemble cast. Plenty of fun. Very heartwarming. It has that iconic scene that you've seen used in memes. To me, you are perfect on the cards written out in the front of the door. So that's where that comes from. Check that out. Number 4, the Ted Lasso Christmas episode from season 2. That became canon the moment it came out. I cried watching it the very first time and will every subsequent time. I did. No, it was honestly for me. It was the team Christmas dinner. Yeah, that they had together. Yeah, I guess and reminded me of our time in college there, where you're not with your family, you're with the family that you chose and the family that you work with, and there's something sweet about that. God damn it. Number 3 is Christmas Story. I grew up watching the 24-hour Christmas Story marathon. I know people are conflicted about that one. It's a good movie. Number 2 is Elf, another one that did the impossible, becoming modern Christmas canon in a hurry. And number 1 for me, every year I go out of my way to watch the Charlie Brown animated Christmas special. It's short, it's sweet. Hearing them sing Hark the Herald Angels Sing at the end on a very cold winter night is my idea of a very perfect evening. So that is the top 5. Also receiving votes, the animated Grinch movie is an absolute classic. Yeah, I fuck with the animated one heavily. No, animated one, greater than sign. Also, Home Alone's overrated. I am. Yeah. You thought it was just a very well thought out episode of the Rugrats? That's a great movie. Rest in power. Yeah. I do. I'm a big Ryan Reynolds fan too, so you're hardly ever going to get it. There's Christmas elements in that movie? I don't think so. I don't think it's a Christmas movie. All right, that one's under protest. What's number 3? It's in Alaska. What's number 2? good. It's so good. Sinbad and Arnold. Turbo Man. That's an absolute banger of a gift. Yeah, it's right there. Yeah. I agree. Yeah, unassailably a fantastic Christmas movie. So at Gojo Show on Twitter, let us know what you think of our lists. Let us know if you consider the proposal a Christmas movie. You know what? Maybe for our intents and purposes, because it's the Die Hard principle, right? Like, we're not going to have that debate on here, but you can find any way to shoehorn a movie into being on if it's on around Christmas enough. And so keep an eye out. If the proposal comes on at any point in the next few weeks, it is officially a Christmas movie. If it is played on one of those freeform channels during the holiday season, it's a Christmas movie. So be on the lookout. If you see something, say something so we can make Brandon right on this front. And obviously let us know what you think there. Also, make sure you download, subscribe, rate, and review Gojo wherever you get your podcast. Leave us a 5-star rating and a review with your top 5 must-watches for the holiday season. Make sure you check us out on the DraftKings YouTube channel as well so you can watch me burst into tears when Brandon tries to claim that a movie is so Canadian that it must actually be Christmas. Thanks so much. We'll talk to you tomorrow. Boom. Money in the bank.